Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Hagan held his State of the City address earlier today, discussing a wide range of issues impacting Lethbridgians. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation blasted the CBC as the public broadcaster prepares to go on a cross-Canada tour. And veteran Hollywood actor Alec Baldwin has been charged in connection with the shooting of a cinematographer in October of 2021 in New Mexico.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Hagan was at the Coast Hotel on Thursday morning for his State of the City address. It was put on by the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains, Hagan talked about a wide variety of issues impacting residents here in our city.
Community safety was one of the main discussion points from Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Hagan as he spoke to close to 200 people at the Coast Hotel during his State of the City address. He highlighted additional issues that the city needs to look at in 2023, including homelessness and the rise in tent encampments.
That's going to be a challenge this year. We had a challenge with that last year. We're looking at different ways to be able to help those folks in need with different additional shelter space, housing, but also safety. Because of some of the addictions and some of the different crime that comes from that within our community, is making sure that we're working with the businesses and the residents alike on how we can help them with safety so they feel safe within our community.
Lethbridge City Council recently approved a 5.1% tax increase for the next 4 years. Hagan talked about the city's justification for the decision.
We needed to do something as having a 0% tax increase over the previous 3 years and a 1.8 prior to that. With inflation, to keep up with inflation, keep some of the services that the community has asked for, the residents want, we needed to have that, as well as policing is a large part of our budget. And so to be able to increase that and restore what was removed during the pandemic and the last budget and put that into effect, we knew that there was going to be an increase.
Cindy Bester, the CEO of the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce, says events like this one are vital in connecting with our local municipal leaders and sharing the topics of concern that need to be addressed at the business level.
We are seeing movement and discussions and plans being brought forward. Hopefully, we heard some solutions today, so we're going to see January, February, March, some of those results.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The numbers are in from the Brighter Together survey. It's an annual study on the health of Lethbridge businesses. Now, according to a recent survey by the Chamber, BRZ, and Economic Development Lethbridge, 69% of respondents said they feel positive about the health of their business over the next 6 to 12 months. Results also found that 60% of business owners witnessed moderate or substantial growth over the past year compared to just 54% in 2021. As for the number of business owners who saw a decline in business, it fell from 25% in 2021 to just 15% last year. Lethbridge organizations will be receiving just over $11.2 million in federal government funding. The money will go to groups such as the U of L, Lethbridge College, the Alberta Sugar Beet Growers, and the Lethbridge and District Exhibition. Dan Vandal, Minister of Prairies Economic Development Canada, says the funding is for 18 projects to support tourism and economic development. He says the funds should also help to create 230 new jobs.
It's been in the cards probably for the last year. We have regular intakes. Organizations make application for the different funding envelopes that we do have. And those applications are analyzed by public officials, and then they're recommended for approval to our offices, the minister's office. We do a second review, and then we approve. Usually, we approve the recommendation.
The Alberta Associate Minister of Red Tape Reduction, Grant Hunter, says this investment will be a real boost to the local economy.
The partnership with the federal government in terms of what's happening with the agriculture is absolutely critical. As I've said before, as our government has said before, we have a very big play going on right now in southern Alberta. The agri-food processing corridor between Lethbridge and Medicine Hat that we're working on as a province is going to create massive growth in GDP, lots of growth in terms of jobs, good-paying businesses, good-paying jobs, new businesses that will come in.
Officials also announced a new Prairies Ken Regional Office in Lethbridge's historic downtown post office. Well, it was a fairly mild day once again today in many parts of southwestern Alberta. Angela Stewart is out at Henderson Lake in Lethbridge and joins us now with an early peek at the forecast. Angela, not only will we be enjoying milder temperatures, but we may also experience more of those Chinook winds as well?
Yeah, Hal, that's right. The rest of the week is shaping up nicely. Those Chinook winds will be sticking around, so pretty good temperatures outside. As for tonight, -6 the expected high with clear conditions. Tomorrow, 4 degrees the expected high and sunny skies. As for how the rest of the week is looking, I'll have all those details coming up later in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Angela. A new poll by Nano says if a federal election was held today, the Conservatives would win. The Tories currently have a 7-point lead over the Trudeau Liberals. The poll says Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives would capture 35.6% of the vote, while the Liberals would garner just 28.3%. The federal NDP would come in third with 20.7% support. Nick Nanos called the numbers very grim for the Liberals. He says the party is on its heels and Canadians are looking at the Conservatives. Now, according to the Nanos poll, healthcare was the top national concern for Canadians, followed by inflation, jobs, the economy, and then the environment. When it came to Canadians' preferred choice for Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau held a small lead over Pierre Poilievre at 30% compared to Poilievre's 27.5%. Jagmeet Singh was a distant third at just 16.2% support. A number of Canadians are struggling to put food on their tables right now. Inflation is still quite high as the cost of groceries continue to rise. Political reporter Brian Lilly did some research as to the cost of food today and has some interesting numbers for us.
Potatoes up 21.9%. Other fresh vegetables up 11.7%. Non-alcoholic beverages, so we're talking your Coke, your Pepsi, your Buble, that's up 16.6%. Bakery products up 13.5%. Coffee and tea 13.2%. Preserved fruit and fruit preparations like jams, that's up 7.2%. That seems like a bargain. Everybody going to the grocery store knows that this is a problem. The question is, does it become a political problem? My colleague Warren Kinsella writing in The Sun the other day that empires like the Russian Empire have been taken down by the price of bread. This could become politically toxic for Justin Trudeau and politically helpful for Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre.
Mr. Brian Lilly will also discuss why there were some very tense moments between Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau recently. He'll have details coming up in the second half of our program. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says she will fight the Trudeau Liberals' just transition idea with every tool at Alberta's disposal. Smith says the initiative would kill thousands of jobs in Alberta's energy sector. She also says when Albertans purchase an NDP membership provincially, they automatically become a member of the Jagmeet Singh Justin Trudeau alliance.
A lot of people don't know this, but it's really important because when you buy a membership in the provincial NDP, you automatically get a membership in the federal NDP because they are the same party. Jagmeet Singh is Rachel Notley's boss under the constitution of the NDP. Also in 2019, Jagmeet Singh agreed to prop up Justin Trudeau's minority government in exchange for the Just Transition Act. So when I talk about the NDP Liberal coalition, I am talking about the NDP party of Notley and Singh in full cooperation with Trudeau's Liberal Party.
The head of the CBC, Catherine Tate, is going on a cross-Canada tour to promote and talk about the importance of the CBC to Canadians. Tate called CBC journalism standards and practices the highest in the country. This despite a number of Canadians calling for the federal government to defund the public broadcaster, saying it's no longer impartial or relevant. This tour will be paid for by your tax dollars. Now, to chat about this in more detail is Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and he joins us from Ottawa. Franco, how well do you think this taxpayer-funded CBC tour will go over with Canadians?
Not too well, I don't think. And the CBC is making a great case for why it should be defunded. This sounds like a complete waste of taxpayers' money. And here's the thing. The CBC is already taking more than $1 billion from taxpayers every single year to do TV, to do radio, and to do online news. So people know who the CBC is. And you know what? I feel a little bit bad for the reporters at the CBC because instead of asking hard questions to other Canadians, to holding people accountable, it looks like they're being forced to give softball questions to their boss. So look, if the CBC's president wants to go around Canada and talk about the CBC, the president should be using their own money, not wasting more of taxpayers' money.
Now, can the CBC hold the federal government to account when it takes around $1.4 billion taxpayers' dollars a year from it?
Well, that's a great question, right? And I think that's why I think so many taxpayers are skeptical that a media organization can hold the government accountable when it's taking taxpayers' money. And that's why we continue to call for the defunding of the CBC. No tax dollars should be going to the CBC, but it's also why we're calling for an end to the media bailout, right? The nearly $600 million media bailout. Taxpayers should not be forced to pay for government subsidized media. Those media outlets should be required to fund their own operations voluntarily.
Now, speaking of taxpayer dollars, Franco, federal union negotiators are pushing the federal government for a huge raise for workers with the Canada Revenue Agency.
The union negotiators are demanding about 30% wage increases over 3 years. Now, I think when many Canadians hear about these demands, they're going to be frustrated, but they're also going to feel anxiety. How are they going to pay? How can they afford higher taxes to pay for these out-of-touch demands by union negotiators? You know, the Canadians who are putting groceries back on the shelves, they can't afford this. The restaurants who are worried about a recession around the corner, they can't afford this. The Canadians who are worried about their mortgage payments going up can't afford this. These are out-of-touch demands, and we need our members of parliament to speak out against these union negotiators.
Thanks so much, Franco. That was Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joining us from Ottawa. Les Landry, the 65-year-old disabled senior from Medicine Hat who allegedly applied for medical assistance in dying, has now been charged with kidnapping. Medicine Hat police say on January the 14th, they responded to a call from a woman who claimed she was confined to a vehicle and was driven to a secluded area against her will. She was able to exit the vehicle after she was in it, and then Landry slowed it down. During their investigation, police say the woman had arranged to be picked up by Landry after responding to a request for house cleaning service that was posted online. Landry was released from custody and will appear in court on February the 28th. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly and the UK's Foreign Secretary James Cleverly met in Toronto recently to discuss how to help Ukraine's defense against Russian invaders. Joly says the two countries need to continue to support Ukraine.
We're announcing that additional Canadian expertise will soon be joining the UK government's information cell to fight back against Russian disinformation. Continued collaboration is a necessity as we respond to Vladimir Putin's increasingly desperate moves in Ukraine. Today, my officials are summoning Russia's ambassador to Canada to make clear we do not accept the sheer brutality of Russia's recent attacks against civilians in Dnipro and to condemn face-to-face the anti-Semitic comments made by Russia's minister Sergei Lavrov.
We must make good on our commitment to back Ukraine until it succeeds. We have made it clear that we feel that the provision of modern NATO standard-made battle tanks is an incredibly important element on giving Ukraine the best chance to successfully expel Russia from its territory. British and Canadian armed forces personnel are helping to train Ukrainian soldiers. And our two countries have joined hands with our allies to punish Russia with the heaviest sanctions ever imposed on an advanced economy.
Actor Alec Baldwin and a weapons specialist will be charged with involuntary manslaughter in the fatal shooting of a cinematographer who was shot and killed on a New Mexico movie set. Santa Fe's district attorney announced the charges against Baldwin and Hannah Reed, who supervised weapons on the set of the Western movie Rust. Helena Hutchins died shortly after being wounded during rehearsals for Rust at a ranch on the outskirts of Santa Fe on October the 21st of 2021. Baldwin was pointing a pistol at Hutchins when the gun went off, killing her and wounding the director, Joel Souza. The charge is a fourth-degree felony punishable by up to 18 months in jail, along with a $5,000 U.S. fine under New Mexico law. You know, they've been married for just over 5 decades and are still going quite strong. A Lethbridge couple is sharing their story of how they met, fell in love, and have grown together in good times and bad. As Angela Stewart tells us now, the couple say the key to their successful marriage is being each other's best friends.
They met in Saskatoon in 1962, both in their late teens. He, a young university student. She, a young churchgoer and a member of Mayfair United Church at the time.
6 of us went from the university, six theological students went to Mayfair, and there was a woman in a pink dress.
In that moment, there was an instant attraction to one another.
She was a fun person to be with. She was always laughing about something.
And talking.
I'm getting emotional thinking about it.
I thought he had brown eyes. It turns out they're hazel, but I was attracted to his looks and his how he related to people.
The Shellingtons were married 2 years later in 1964 and have been together ever since. The couple just celebrated their 58th wedding anniversary in December.
We've been able to, look at what the other person's needs are and fit our own needs in around that. And that's part of what our concept of marriage is about.
Married for over 5 decades now, the Lovebirds have had their fair share of arguments.
We came to understand that's what healthy conflict is about. It's not that you always agree on things, but that you sit down and deal with it, and you make some kind of compromise.
Their love for one another is still ever so present and strong. They say the key is to marry your best friend.
And take lots of time to work at that friendship. And there isn't any hurry to get into bed, but there is a hurry to find a friend.
Their weekly date nights are what helps to keep their marriage alive, they say, whether that's bonding over a hot meal or reading their favorite books together. The Shellingtons say they're working on their 59th year of marriage, with many more anniversaries to come. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
58 years, wow, what a beautiful story. While our weather has been quite beautiful for this time of year, the average temperature for Lethbridge for this time of year is -2. Once again, we were well above that, and that trend will continue. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. You know, those Chinook winds have been bringing some much warmer temperatures to our region as of late. Angela Stewart is out at Henderson Lake in Lethbridge with a full look at the forecast. Angela, the warmer Chinook winds felt quite nice today.
Yeah, Hal, this week's weather has served us pretty well for mid-January, I would say. It hasn't been super cold, which all around is pretty good news. As for this weekend, we will be seeing a little bit of snow for our region. Friday, 4 degrees and sunny conditions. Saturday, shaping up nicely, 7 the high and sunny. Sunday, dropping down to -1 with the white stuff making its way into our region. A high of 0 is expected for Monday with that sun coming back out. Tuesday, 5 the high and a mix of sun and cloud. Wednesday, +3 and a mix of sun and cloud. -2 is the average high for this time of year. The average low is -14. We are above our average high, so good news there. The highest temperature recorded back on this day was 16 degrees in 1944. The lowest temperature, -35 in 1969. Did anyone see that sunrise this morning at 8:20? Such a pretty sky outside. And the sun set at 5:04 this evening. Looking to temperatures across the country now for Friday, mainly cloudy and 7 the high in Victoria. Mainly cloudy in Vancouver, 6 degrees the expected high. In Edmonton tomorrow, sunny conditions and 2 degrees. There will be a slight wind chill in the morning, -8, so dress to the conditions. +2 the high in Calgary tomorrow. The wind chill in the morning, -9. There will be some light winds as well, gusting to 40 near noon. Saskatoon -6 and sunny skies, the wind chill -23 in the morning, warming up to -13 for the afternoon. Increasing cloud for Regina, -8 throughout the day. That wind chill again -24, so dress warm because those conditions can be pretty brutal. In Winnipeg, a chance of light snow, about a 30% chance. Wind gusting to 15 and a high of -4. To the central part of the country now, in Toronto, a chance of snow, 0 for the high for Friday. Ottawa, periods of snow and -3. Snow in Montreal tomorrow, -3 the expected high, expect about a 2 to 4 centimeters. Fredericton, periods of snow, 2 to 4 centimeters expected there as well, -3 the high. Halifax, snow in the morning, 10 to 15 centimeters. The wind chill -3 in the morning and cloudy skies. Charlottetown, the temperature will remain steady near -3, cloudy conditions for the day. St. John's, a chance of snow and a 60% chance of it, 0 for the high. And that's a look at your full weather forecast from Henderson Park here in Lethbridge.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
Stats Canada says wholesale sales increased in November for the fourth straight month. The agency says sales were up a half a percentage point from October to $83.8 billion. It says the biggest gain was in the auto and auto parts subsector, where sales jumped 10.1% to a record $13.8 billion. Sales in the miscellaneous subsector, however, fell 5.1% to $12.2 billion. With the promise of cheaper fares, a flurry of so-called discount airlines have burst onto the Canadian scene over the past few years. But experts say the low-cost airline model is exacerbating an already existing pilot shortage that could become an even bigger problem. Startups including Calgary-based Lynx, Edmonton-based Flair Airlines, and WestJet subsidiary Swoop have been rapidly expanding across Canada. As for the pilot shortage, it has been brewing for quite a while now based on an aging workforce, pandemic-related layoffs, and spiraling training costs. Industry experts say becoming a commercial pilot can now cost up to $100,000, discouraging many young people from entering the profession. Newspaper publisher Postmedia has sold the Calgary Herald building for $17.25 million to U-Haul. The announcement came the same day Postmedia said it was moving a dozen of its Alberta community papers to digital-only formats and laying off workers. A memo says the publications moving to digital formats will make the transition on February the 27th, but did not say which papers will be making the switch. Stocks were down on Wall Street as investors were worried about the U.S. and it may be headed to another recession. New reports show weaknesses in several areas of the American economy, including the manufacturing and housing industries. They follow worse than expected readings on retail sales, a cornerstone of the U.S. economy, and industrial production. Altogether, they show an economy slowing under the weight of last year's interest rate hikes by the U.S. Federal Reserve. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 34 points on the day to finish at 20,341. The Dow was down 252 points to 33,044. The S&P 500 was down 30 on the day to 3898, and the Nasdaq was down 104 points to 10,852. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.10 to $80.58 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was down 12 cents to $3.20 U.S. Gold was even on the day at $1932.24 U.S. an ounce, and silver was also even at $23.85 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12 per bushel, barley's at $9.40, canola's at $18.85, and corn is at $11.25 per bushel. Live cattle February contract was down 85 cents to $155.95. Feeder cattle January contract was down $1.40 to $178.10. And lean hogs February contract was down 68 cents to 76.65. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.24 U.S. Recapping one of our top stories, Lethbridge organizations will be receiving just over $11.2 million in federal funding. The money will be going towards groups such as the U of L, Lethbridge College, the Alberta Sugar Beet Growers, and the Lethbridge and District Exhibition. Dan Vandal, Canada's Minister for Prairies Can, says the funding is for 18 projects to support tourism and economic development. He says the money should also help to create 230 new jobs. Many Canadians are feeling the pinch when it comes to the cost of groceries. Toronto Sun columnist and one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, will have the percentage increases on a lot of the foods we buy at the grocery store in just a moment. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Inflation was down in December, but if you've been at the grocery store lately, you may have seen that food prices have been going up. Brian Lilly is one of our regular contributors and a Toronto Sun columnist, and we're going to talk to Brian about inflation and what's going on with food prices right now. He joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, how does Stats Canada say inflation is going down when it's getting even more difficult to feed our families?
Because the way Stats Canada measures inflation, it takes into account a whole pile of different elements that we need to buy for daily life. Clothing, household goods, toiletries, soap and deodorant, things like that. By the way, those are going up as well, significantly. But oil and gas are both down. So the gas you put in your car, not the natural gas, but the gas you put in your car down 13% in December compared to November. Home heating fuel down 14%. Now, those have both gone up tremendously over the last year. So year over year, it's still very large, but month over month, they went down. So that helped overall inflation go down from 6.8% to 6.3%. That is still ridiculously high for overall inflation. We generally want it between 2 and 3%, nothing above that. So it's still more than double the Bank of Canada's rate. But you're right on food. Let me give you some of the numbers here, because overall food inflation is more than 11%. But within that, there's some eye-popping numbers. Okay, so I'm just going to look at my screen and read them off. Tomatoes up 21.9%. Other fresh vegetables up 11.7%. Non-alcoholic beverages, so we're talking your Coke, your Pepsi, your Buble, that's up 16.6%. Bakery products up 13.5%. Coffee and tea 13.2%. Preserved fruit and fruit preparations like jams, that's up 7.2%. That seems like a bargain. Everybody going to the grocery store knows that this is a problem. The question is, does it become a political problem? My colleague Warren Kinsella writing in The Sun the other day that empires like the Russian Empire have been taken down by the price of bread. This could become politically toxic for Justin Trudeau and politically helpful for Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre.
We've seen a lot of people as well tweet about the price of chicken. The 6 packs of chicken, $37 to $40. I mean, it's unbelievable what's happening right now. Brian, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in Western Canada recently. He spoke on a number of very important issues. But before we get to those, how did he end up in a fight with Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe?
Yeah, well, because he went to Scott Moe's house, put his feet up on the coffee table while relaxing on the couch and eating all Moe's snacks, and didn't tell him he was there. Justin Trudeau went to Saskatoon, toured a rare earth mineral or elements processing facility in Saskatoon with Saskatoon Mayor Charlie Clark. Now, if you know that area, Charlie Clark is he's a progressive hero to the Liberals and the NDP. I see him as someone that the Liberals might try and court as a candidate to run someday. He kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, though, on the prairies because so many of the elected officials are Conservative, but Charlie Clark's there. So Trudeau meets with Clark. He holds a news conference with Clark at this processing facility. Moe finds out that Trudeau's there through the media. And Moe's point was, this is really disappointing, but it's not shocking. And he said it's disappointing because this is an area where the federal government and the province of Saskatchewan see eye to eye. And he said it would have been a great opportunity for us to sit down together. Trudeau's asked about it at his news conference and says, well, I've done lots of announcements with Premier Moe, and we'll do more, and Saskatchewan's a good partner. And then he starts taking a shot at Moe, saying, but the government of Saskatchewan needs to get, there's a lot of work to do when it comes to environmental issues and green jobs. Kind of an unfair and unprompted dig at Moe that he didn't have to take.
Now, despite the dust-up with Premier Moe, Brian Moe told reporters that he strongly believes the feds and the provinces are very close to a deal on health funding. What can you tell us at this point?
They've been at odds for quite a while. The premiers are unanimous in this, and it's been fascinating to watch this because we've seen premiers come and go, political stripes running the different provinces change, but for the last 4 or 5 years, there's been unanimity among conservative-oriented governments, liberal governments, New Democrat governments, including British Columbia. They're all saying the same thing. The federal government is not a good partner when it comes to healthcare funding. They want an immediate increase. The federal government currently provides about 22% of total funding. The feds say, no, it's higher. It's over 30% because we transferred your tax points. Either way, the provinces are saying, you still need to be providing more. It's not the 50-50 partnership it once was. Trudeau has been reluctant to that, despite campaigning when he was first elected that Harper's plan was a multi-billion-dollar cut to healthcare. He kept it. He not only kept it, he's the one that actually implemented it 2 years after he took office. So Trudeau's been talking out of both sides of his mouth on this health issue. Lately, he's been saying you want strings attached. But I think they found a way that the premiers will accept some of the strings because they're mostly around reporting. It's reporting data. Okay, Alberta's got a backlog of surgeries in X. You get the money. How has that helped? You've got to report back. The provinces need to do a better job of reporting. I would agree with that, and I would agree that the federal government needs to do a better job of collecting and releasing that information, because we don't have a lot of good, solid information across the country where we're able to compare apples to apples, oranges to oranges. We need that. So if that is what gets a deal, I think it's a good idea.
Now, Brian, one of the issues Trudeau was asked about during his recent stop here in Western Canada was on bail reform. Now, this is a big issue for premiers, police chiefs, and mayors all across the country. Is Prime Minister Trudeau open to potentially reforming bail?
He hinted that perhaps he is, but I'm not too sure, and I'll tell you why. In 2019, they brought in Bill C-75. This is the one that said to judges, it codified in law that judges have to use restraint in granting bail, not restraint in keeping people in jail, but restraint for refusing bail. That granting bail has to be the default option, less onerous restrictions on people. Whether it was well intended, misguided, I don't know. It seemed to come out of the same academic area that New York State had. And I can tell you right now, New York State, the Democratic governor there, they're having the same problems because they went down the same path. And in her State of the State address last week, she announced that they're going to go back. Why? They're having the same issues. Repeat violent offenders arrested, granted bail, they reoffend, they're granted bail again, they reoffend. This is what we're dealing with in this country. So over the weekend, the premiers released a letter. Again, all 13 premiers, every province, every territory, every political party represented, said the same thing to Trudeau. This is a problem. We want a reverse onus clause put into Section 95 of the Criminal Code, so that if you have a loaded, prohibited gun on you, that you have to prove why you need bail. Not having the Crown doesn't have to prove why you should be denied bail. You have to prove why you get it. The Prime Minister did say he'd be open to considering that. It would be definitely a departure from where he and his government have been. But I hope that on serious repeat offenders, that he does do something, because so far his government's been going the other way, as we've talked about before, getting rid of mandatory minimum sentences and these bail reforms. He's been going the wrong way. Maybe all 13 premiers from all provinces and territories and all parties is enough to convince him, okay, I've gone too far.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was also asked about Bill C-21, Brian, modifications to the gun control bill. He was asked specifically about how this will impact farmers and possibly violate Indigenous treaty rights. Did he show any sign of looking to change the government stance on this? Because, Brian, hunters are pretty angry right now.
Yeah, not at all. He seemed to double down. And I'm trying to understand the government on this, because they were steadfast in C-21 and the amendments. Then they started saying, okay, well, we're listening. Maybe we went too far. Now they're pushing back again, saying, no, these guns are too dangerous to be in the hands of Canadians. There've been no problems with them. People aren't out committing gun crimes with the Welby waterfowl shotgun that's going to be banned. But these things are on the list. Yesterday, it seemed like a case of he had taken one step forward before, and now he's taking 2 steps back. That's what the government seems to be doing. Really, what I think they're doing is licking their finger, putting it up, and seeing which way the wind is blowing, and who's angriest at the moment. That, I think, seems to be driving their policy, which, if you have read even the excerpts of Bill Morneau's book or seen some of the interviews he's done, the former finance minister says, yeah, that's the way that the Prime Minister's office determines public policy an awful lot. It's about the news cycle, it's about popularity, it's about Twitter, it's not about sound public policy.
Okay, let's talk about natural gas for just a moment here. Made big headlines last week, Brian. A call to ban gas stoves in the United States. At the same time, Japan's Prime Minister is begging Canada for natural gas. Now, Brian, you believe these two issues may be related somehow? How so?
Because there is a major push on to delegitimize the use of natural gas, to shut it down. And it's the same playbook that was used to villainize the oil and gas industry in Canada, Alberta in particular, especially when it comes to the tar sands, or the oil sands as they're properly called. A lot of the same groups, the Tides Foundation, Rockefeller Brothers Fund. Now the new player in all this is the Bezos Earth Fund. That's Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, has a $10 billion fund devoted to climate change issues. This is what's driving an awful lot of this. That so-called study that claimed that your kids are 12.7% more likely to get asthma if you have a gas stove in your home was funded by a group called the Rocky Mountain Institute. They're funded by the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. They're funded by Bezos Earth Fund, the MacArthur Foundation, and a lot of these other groups that are fully against natural gas. They're against all fossil fuels. So they don't care that natural gas is seen as a transition fuel around the world. They just want it ended. So, they funded that study. They're also funding groups that are going around convincing municipal councils to pass calls to ban the use of natural gas for electricity generation. That's happened in about 30 municipalities here in Ontario. Vancouver, Toronto have both put forward policies to say we need to stop using natural gas to heat our homes by 2030. You stop using it for hot water tanks. Natural gas is the number one source of electric power. Sorry, I'm from Ontario. We still always call it hydroelectric. It's the number one source of electricity generation in Alberta. If you turned around and said to Alberta, you've got to get rid of natural gas, what are they going to make their electricity from? What will they generate it from? Wind is not where it should be yet. Solar is completely unreliable. And anybody you talk to in the electricity sector says you need natural gas as a backup when you are using wind and solar, because the wind stops blowing and the sun stops shining. And at that point, you still have customers demanding electricity. That's when you turn on the natural gas, which is one of the most easy to switch fuels. All of this is a push against natural gas. That's what, they've got a hold on the Trudeau government. So you had Japan, you had Germany come, ask for our natural gas. The Germans built a liquefied natural gas import terminal in 10 months. We could have done something similar to help with the export of liquefied natural gas. We didn't. We refused to, because the Trudeau government just fundamentally believes we need to decarbonize our economy. And all of this is driven by activists funded by these same rich foundations that funded the bogus natural gas stove study. It's all part and parcel of the same progressive groupthink.
Brian, we saw the video of a Conservative senator blasting Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland about a request for $2 billion so the Trudeau Liberals could buy shares in a company that allegedly does not exist. What's the story here?
Yeah, I started getting this. I don't know about you, but I started getting this video sent to me last week. Somebody had found it. It was a Senate hearing from December 7th. It got very little media attention. In fact, Hal, when I looked for any media coverage of this hearing where Minister Freeland was there to talk about the fall economic statement, there was one story in the Globe and Mail on December 8th, the day after it happened, detailing exactly what this video discusses. That's it. Nobody else on the Hill covered it. There were no videos. Last week it starts popping up and people are saying, oh, well, the government stole the money. She's giving it to her friends. This is for the World Economic Forum. No. They did want $2 billion to buy shares of a company that didn't exist. That is true. But the government did say what that company will be. They had no details. It's called the Canada Growth Fund, and it's for the green energy transition, the just transition that is so popular in Alberta these days. They want to put together this fund, $2 billion from the government, up to $15 billion total, with the rest coming from the private sector. Now, as they're about to vote on this, Senator Elizabeth Marshall from Newfoundland, she's the former Auditor General in Newfoundland, former top finance department official in the bureaucracy. She's saying, wait a minute, why are you asking us for this? There's not even a description. How this was first announced in the April budget. Then it was funded in the November fall economic statement. And by December, they still didn't have any structure in place. not even a good description for the senators, the MPs to vote on. Of course, it did pass. The money was allocated, but there's still no corporation. The government hasn't said who will control this Canada Growth Fund, just that it'll be professional investment advisors that will make decisions. But is it going to be in government hands or is it going to be in the private sector hands? We're handing over $2 billion to fund the green transition, train everyone in Alberta to become janitors and Walmart greeters, and we don't have any details on it. That's not how government should work, and that's the real problem with this.
Yeah, and a lot of those tax dollars also coming from Alberta, so we can transition away from the oil and gas sector. Unbelievable. Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
On October 5th of 2022, the Alberta government announced that Alberta will be the first province to regulate psychedelic therapy. These new regulations just went into effect on January the 16th, but what exactly is it? What's it for and how is it used exactly? So here to give us some of these answers is Cami Tanner from the Herbal Apothecary in Lethbridge, Alberta. Cami, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Great to have you on today. Okay, so Cami, for those of us who don't know, first of all, what is a psychedelic therapy and who would benefit from it?
So psychedelic therapy is using things like psilocybin mushrooms to have a psychoactive experience and helping with treating mental health issues.
Okay, I have heard about this before, so now it's regulated for here in Alberta. So how is it administered? Is it literally like taking a psychedelic mushroom, or is it in a different way, a different form?
Yeah, that's exactly how it is. It's basically doing a trip, but you're doing it under the guidance of a licensed psychiatrist who is licensed to do regulated psychedelic therapy.
Okay, so it's used for mental health, mental illness even?
It is, yep.
Okay, so I've heard about people like going deep into South America and taking part in this in like some little hut. So you're telling me that people can do this now in Alberta. Is it done in a doctor's office? How? Tell me more.
So it will be done in a licensed facility. There are very heavy regulations right now. This is a brand new thing. So we're just kind of feeling our way through this, and things will change and regulations will update as this goes further on. But right now it has to be done in a licensed facility under a licensed professional.
Okay, so basically those are the rules. Can you tell us maybe more about the new rules regarding the use of this therapy that has just gone into effect January 16th?
Yeah, so it's not going to be like cannabis dispensaries where you're going to go out and buy magic mushrooms and go home and take them. That's not what this is intending for. This is for heavy mental illness therapy or treating things like PTSD, depression, anxiety that need to be done under the watch of somebody who's licensed to do this, because there's a lot of things that can come up and a lot of things that happen that need to have some guidance to go through these types of healings.
Okay, like a lot of people might think this is very bizarre. So tell me, how can a psychedelic trip suddenly cure your mental illness? It almost doesn't make sense.
So there was a lot of research being done in the 40s, 50s, and 60s using psychedelics. But the amazing thing about using psychedelics as opposed to pharmaceuticals, pharmaceuticals have their place, but it's more of a band-aid that's covering up things and just helping people to kind of get through their day and manage the day. But the psychedelics are actually going into the body, changing the neurotransmitters, and psilocybin essentially can reset or reboot the brain so that you can have a new way of thinking and changing your thought patterns.
That's interesting because, I remember being a teenager and like your parents kind of preach at you, don't ever try that because it does just that. It changes those neurotransmitters. And to us, that seemed very like a bad thing to do.
Well, that's why it's necessary to do it under a licensed professional, because they're going to help you change those routes, change those thought patterns in a healthy way.
How exactly?
So when you go through these psychoactive trips, you're going to confront some of these thoughts or thought patterns that you're having, and they can help you walk through to kind of change the way that we're perceiving things and seeing things in a new way, and rerouting the way that we're actually processing those memories or those thoughts.
So is it the patient in this case takes this mushroom, is tripping, I guess, in a licensed facility? Is it almost like there's a psychiatrist there with them to talk them through it?
Yeah, that's exactly
Okay.
what we're looking at now is having that psychiatrist within that therapy.
Okay. Have you seen these studies actually become, obviously there's success because the government has now regulated it. So are there any success stories? Do you know of any personally?
Yeah, there's huge success stories. I mean, you can look at Paul Stamets down in the US, who's the huge mycologist, and he's very vocal about his experience with his social anxiety disorders and stuttering. And he did a mushroom trip, and after one dose, he was basically cured. We know people here locally that are, so desperate for this new type of therapy. We've talked to some veterans who are severely suffering from PTSD and have gone decades through this trauma without success through counseling or medication, and gone through one experience with psychedelic mushrooms, and their quality of life has returned back to them.
Okay, so is there a cost to this? Is it private?
We can assume right now that it is going to be a private cost. But when you look at the way that things are now with traditional mental illness treatments, inpatient, outpatient, medication, psychologists, therapies, it can go into the tens of thousands of dollars a month. And usually that's out of pocket, where now we're looking at one psychedelic trip and you have the potential to be healed in that one-time session. So the cost is very, very low compared to traditional methods, even looking at loss of production or loss of time from having to leave your job for these therapies, and the cost on the economy that it takes to put those traditional methods out. So it's going to be very cost effective for a lot of patients.
Okay, so how does this stop the average person then from just going out and buying a bag of magic mushrooms and going camping with their, I mean, you kids, when people are young, they have done this. And I mean,
Sure.
Are there long-term studies of people who have used drugs in the past and now they have no mental illness because they use these drugs? Or is it mostly that coupled with the psychiatrist that they're sitting there with?
There's always people that are going to go out and do this on their own because I think they've done the research themselves and seen the case studies back, like I said, when they were doing it in the 40s and 50s and going, yeah, there is merit to this, but we just don't have things in place. So they've gone out because it has worked for them and they've needed those treatments. But I mean, with anything, people are going to do things on their own, but for the most part, it's better to have it done under regulations because you're going to get the best possible outcome. So that's where this kind of medical treatment plays a part.
That's so interesting. This kind of changes that whole campaign, don't do drugs, kids. Right. So Cami, how does this change with what was already available for Canadians?
This is just going to be another huge tool in the mental illness toolbox, I guess you could say. A lot of people are just not having the best results with those traditional methods. And so we're really excited to be able to have this new tool to work with that studies are showing is working amazing.
Okay. Do you know how long the provincial government has been actually working on this?
It's a little unclear. I know we've been watching the Psychedelic Association of Canada, and they put together a very large memorandum for analysis of regulation, and they submitted that to the Minister of Health back in September of last year. So I think Alberta, it's amazing that they've seen the benefits of this, that they're jumping on board. I think everybody was surprised that Alberta was the first province out of all the provinces who could have chosen this. But we're very excited that Alberta is the first province and that they see the benefit of it and that they are moving forward to try and do something better than what hasn't been working before.
Is this some sort of a transformative moment in healthcare for Canadians? It almost sounds like it is.
I think a lot of people, when that announcement came out, were cheering. We're very excited.
Wow. Okay, so can you maybe describe the difference then between psychedelic therapy and psilocybin mushrooms, or are they the same thing?
It's the same thing. So psilocybin mushrooms are psychedelic. So the psilocybin is what is the chemical compound in the mushroom. And when we ingest that, the body turns it to psilocin, which is the psychoactive compound, which allows you to hallucinate and, affects your senses and your way of thinking. So it is the exact same thing.
Okay. Is this like all natural, or has this been like chemically sort of changed in a lab?
This is all natural. I mean, you can chemically produce it in a lab, but we are looking with our company Pharmacil to produce these mushrooms and grow them naturally in a very controlled environment. But that's the beautiful thing, is this is natural. It works harmoniously with the body and doesn't really affect long-term side effects like medications can.
Interesting. Okay, I was actually just going to get to your company Pharmacil when you mentioned it there. So yeah, so I understand you and your husband own Herbal Apothecary in Lethbridge, but you've now started this separate company, Pharmacil.
Yeah, I mean, we're big.
Is it basically to help?
Pharmacil, yeah. So we're big believers in plant medicine and healing the body through natural means. Medicine is great; it has its place, but we've seen the detriments and the downfalls to pharmaceuticals and long-term effects of people not being able to get off medications or lots of side effects. And so we actually started our application process back in November of 2021 and submitted our application early 2022. So we were well ahead of the game before we even knew that regulations were going to be coming out, because we believed so much in it and knew that this was going to be something that was really important to Canadians to help with their mental health.
Wow, that's so interesting that you've been looking at this for so long and been working on this for so long, and now here it is, and you didn't even know that Alberta would be regulating it.
No, not at all.
Wow. Okay, so what do you think is the motivation to use this new medical option? You're mentioning mental illness, but are we talking about, you mentioned PTSD, but could it cure a depression, anxiety, those types of things?
Yeah, that's what it's great for. And so we also have to remember that the regulations, it doesn't just include the psilocybin, but it's also LSD, ketamine, mescaline, and MDMA. So they all kind of play different parts within the brain and do certain things, but psilocybin, yes, for sure, is going to help with PTSD and a lot of stress and anxiety disorders, which it has been increasing, but ever since COVID-19, we have just seen mental illness kind of go off the charts. And so there are studies out there that shows that Canada is, I think it's ranked 3rd or 4th in the world for antidepressant users. So that just kind of shows the monumental amount of mental illness that is happening. We're in crisis mode, and we need other tools to help deal with this crisis.
Okay, so Cami, I know here in Lethbridge we have a lot of issues with opioids, but just out of curiosity, would these mushrooms be maybe an option for replacing opioid in some cases, or maybe even helping with the damage that opioids have possibly done?
Yeah, so this is not going to be a replacement for opioids. However, these psychedelic therapies can actually help with addiction recovery. They've shown a lot of promise in helping people with addictions to opioids.
Cami, are there possibly other uses outside of the realm of mental illness that this could be used for?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of people, when faced with end-of-life diseases like cancer, things like that, that are fearing death. They actually can take a psilocybin mushroom trip, and it brings a calmness and releases a lot of that anxiety when being faced with death in the end of their life. So it's a wonderful tool in a lot of different ways.
Okay, so it's more of a calming method mentally, not necessarily it's going to physically do anything.
Yeah, it helps them not be so afraid of death. Yeah.
So maybe like let's switch away from the psychedelic mushroom therapy. And I know you have a lot of expertise with herbal options and remedies with Herbal Apothecary. So can you tell us what makes mushrooms in their various forms so beneficial?
Yeah, so we already grow a lot of functional medicinal mushrooms. It's funny because these mushrooms have been used for thousands of years as healing and as medicine. And we got away from them when pharmaceuticals came into play. And it just kind of showed, you can see how our health has deteriorated. And so getting back to a natural way is really quite amazing and really beneficial. And a lot of people are wanting to go back to a natural way because it actually heals the body. It doesn't just put that Band-Aid on, so to speak. And people are seeing a lot of changes within using medicinal mushrooms to problems that they're having.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, so lion's mane is a great one for brain health. There's been a lot of studies done with lion's mane mushroom that has actually on a lot of use of it that has reversed symptoms of Alzheimer and dementia. We have a lot of people that come in using reishi mushroom to help them with sleeping habits and stress and anxiety.
Wow.
So they all do really, really wonderful things. And, it's kind of funny, the old saying, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Right. But we fixed it and now we're broken again. So,
wow, it's interesting how the world works. It looks like we are running out of time, Cami. Very fascinating topic, though. I've learned a lot from you, so I thank you for that. And thanks so much for coming on today.
Yes, and thank you for having me. It's always great to share new knowledge.
Awesome. That was Cami Tammer from the Herbal Apothecary in Lethbridge, Alberta. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.